Rebirth in Mahabharat as Bahubali ch 71-78. Chapter 71, The Night Before Mahayudh. Comment. The night before the Mahayudh, Great War, a solemn atmosphere settled over the camp of the Bahubali alliance. In the main war tent, illuminated by flickering oil lamps, Bahubali convened a meeting of his most vital personnel, Krishna, Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, Karna, Duryodhana and the Pandavas. Bahubali stood before them, his usual warmth replaced by a serious resolve. The combined might of our enemies must be met with absolute unity and the sharpest minds in Aryabharta. For the command of this colossal army, there is only one choice. He turned to the grandsire. Mahamahim Bhishma, will you lead the combined forces of this alliance as our commander-in-chief? Bhishma, his ancient eyes holding the wisdom of decades, accepted the mantle without hesitation. It would be my dharma to ensure justice prevails. I accept. With the central command settled, Bhishma laid out the strategy for the following dawn. Tomorrow, we will deploy the Trishul Vyaha, the trident formation. It provides both stability and piercing offensive power. The three prongs will be led by the most formidable warriors here, Karna, Arjuna and Bahubali himself. They will shatter the enemy's center. As Bhishma discussed various tactical movements and defensive formations, Lord Sri Krishna stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Bahubali. Bahu, Krishna said, using the affectionate name. In this great wheel of war, I too must play my part. I shall not wield a weapon, but my guidance must be present at the forefront of the battle. I will serve as your charioteer. 2. A wave of awe passed through the tent. Bahubali, his voice thick with emotion, bowed deeply. Prabhu, my life's purpose is fulfilled. To have the guidance of the Lord of Dwarka at my side is a blessing no king in history has ever known. I thank you. Bahubali then addressed the room with a crucial point of ethics. Mahararis, we fight not for conquest, but for the safety of our world. The common soldiers on the opposite side fight only because their kings command them. They have no personal quarrel with us. Therefore, to minimize the loss of innocent lives, our primary objective must be swift and decisive. We must target and eliminate the enemy kings and their principal commanders as quickly as possible. We need to dismantle their head, not bleed out their body. Everyone present nodded in unanimous agreement. Yudhishthir added, the sooner the enemy command is broken, the sooner peace can return. This is the path of necessary dharma. 1. The rest of the night was spent in detailed discussion, which division would face the Chedai cavalry, how to counter the Sindhu archers, and the specific roles of Drona, Rudra and the Pandavas in supporting the three main prongs. The next morning broke cold and clear over Kurukshetra. The vast plains were now a spectacle of organized chaos, filled with the roar of war drums, the neighing of horses, and the gleaming steel of countless weapons. On the side of the Dharma alliance, the Trishul Vyaha was formed. Karna commanded the right wing, Arjuna the left, and Bahubali, with Lord Krishna seated as his charioteer, took the critical center position. Across the field, the allied army had assumed the fearsome Vajravayaha, diamond formation. Bhagadata led the front, mounted atop his colossal, battle-hardened war elephant, which commanded a deep column of his terrifying elephant cavalry. The two colossal armies stood motionless, separated by the barren ground, the tension a tangible force that made the air heavy. Then, at the appointed hour, Lord Sri Krishna raised his legendary conch, the Panchajanya. He brought it to his lips and blew a resounding shanknad. The sound was not merely a blast, it was a cosmic roar, a declaration of war, a summons to Dharma, and an acknowledgement of the terrible price about to be paid. The Mahayudh had begun. Both armies roared, and the earth trembled as the first massive waves of soldiers charged towards their destiny. Comment. 2. Comment. Vote. Chapter 72, Mahayudh starts. The sound of the Panchajanya shattered the morning stillness. It was a note of divine finality, and at that instant, the Mahayuddha exploded. The allied army, deployed in the wedge of the Vajravyuha, roared into motion, spearheaded by Bhagadatta's fearsome elephant cavalry. The Dharma alliance, holding the powerful Trishul Vyuha, surged forward to meet the impact. The central prong of the Dharma alliance, led by Bahubali atop his magnificent chariot, faced the terrifying, lumbering charge of Bhagadatta's elephants. Lord Sri Krishna, serving as his charioteer, navigated the heavy, churning field of mud and blood with divine precision. They come with brute force, Bahu. Krishna's voice, calm amidst the chaos, cut through the din. The Vajra head aims to crush us. Then we will pierce the heart, Prabhu. Bahubali declared. His body was a study in fierce concentration. He drew Ujjaya's bow, the ancient weapon humming with latent energy. As the first wave of war elephants thundered toward them, Bahubali chanted the invocation for the Vayavastra. A fierce, cyclonic wind erupted from his arrow, tearing into the ranks of the elephant cavalry. The majestic beasts stumbled, their banners ripped away, their handlers tossed like dolls. Bhagadatta, mounted on his enormous elephant, challenged Bahubali directly. He hurled a massive, barbed Shakti weapon. Bahubali countered instantly, shattering the astra with a precision shot from Ujjaya's bow. You champion of the common folk! Bhagadatta roared from his towering perch. Your justice has poisoned the crown. I will end your new order. Bahubali answered by unleashing a volley of arrows so swift and powerful that they created a whistling cone of death around Bhagadatta's elephant, forcing the Pragjyotisha king to focus entirely on defense and shattering the momentum of the center prong. On the right flank, Karna, the mighty king of Anga, met his most bitter opponent, Jayadratha of Sindhu. The old humiliation Jayadratha carried fueled his desperate fury. The duel was a dazzling spectacle of archery mastery. Jayadratha, a fierce master of the bow, invoked the Nagashtra, serpent weapon, sending a wave of arrows that took the shape of venomous vipers towards Karna. Karna laughed a thunderous, defiant sound. Illusions cannot touch the truth of the sun, Sindhu king. He immediately countered with a magnificent Agnyastra. A blast of sacred fire consumed the serpent arrows, turning them to smoke and leaving a trail of ash on the battlefield. Jayadratha, falling back, invoked the Varunastra, water weapon, summoning torrential rain and mud to extinguish the fires to bog down the Anga's chariot. Do you fight with water and mud, Jayadratha? Karna mocked, his voice full of power. I fight with the fire of my own dharma. He drove his chariot relentlessly forward, raining down arrows with such speed that the Sindhu forces were constantly battered, preventing Jayadratha from gaining any strategic ground. On the left prong, Arjuna, the supreme archer, faced Pondraka Vasudev, the defiant king who saw himself as a rival to divinity. Pondraka, arrogant and skillful, led his forces with destructive zeal. Pondraka launched wave after wave of physical arrows, trying to overwhelm the Pandava forces. Arjuna, focused and precise, responded by invoking the Indrastra, Indra's hail. Unleashing a storm of arrows that descended from the sky like a metal cloud, shattering Pondraka's formations and killing dozens of his commanders. Your arrogance is unmatched, Pondraka. Arjuna cried out, his voice sharp with focus. But true power lies not in pretense, but in skill. The battle on the flanks was a relentless grind. The Pandava brothers and the other Kauravas, led by Duryodhana and guided by the supreme strategy of Bhishma and Drona, held their lines against the attacks from Chedai and Kamrup, utilizing complex maneuvers taught by their gurus. Drona and Kripacharya carved swathes of destruction through the enemy ranks, their ancient mastery proving unstoppable. The battle raged for hours. The air grew heavy with the screams of the wounded and the smell of blood. As the sun, a deep crimson orb, finally touched the horizon, casting long, bloody shadows across the field, the exhaustion of the human armies was absolute. The rules of Dharma Yuddha required both sides to halt combat at sunset, tend to the dead, and rest. As the sun's last fiery edge dipped beneath the plain, the bugles sounded the retreat on both sides. Weary, dust-caked soldiers began to withdraw. It was in this moment of exhaustion and mandated ceasefire that Krodhakala struck. A horrifying, guttural roar unlike the trumpets or drums of man split the twilight. The earth began to shake violently, not from elephants, but from something darker. From the concealed western woods, a massive, tide-like wave of pure malice spilled onto the field. Krodhakala, towering and monstrous, led his terrifying army of 6 Akshohinis Rakshasas, demons and dark creatures whose very forms defied mortal armies. Fools! Krodhakala's voice boomed, shattering the peaceful retreat. You fight by the rules of Dharma. We fight only by the rule of destruction. The ambush was immediate and brutal. The unsuspecting human soldiers, tired and turning their backs to retreat, were caught in the sudden, horrifying onslaught of Rakshasa claws, demonic blades, and overwhelming numbers. The Dharma alliance, exhausted from a full day of righteous combat, was now plunged into a nightmare of an asymmetrical, unholy war, precisely when their guard was down. Comment. 3. Comment. Vote. Chapter 73, The Call to Dharma. The moment Krodhakala and his infernal army of 6 Rakshasa Akshohinis burst from the twilight woods, the tide of war and the spirit of the human alliance turned to ice. The allied forces of Bhagadata, Jayadratha and Pondraka Vasudev, seeing their demonic reinforcements, roared in renewed bloodlust and urged their soldiers to abandon the ceasefire and resume the attack. The common soldiers of the Dharma alliance, already battered by a day of grueling combat, crumbled. Facing the terrifying, fierce faces of Rakshasas and Asuras, their exhaustion gave way to pure, paralyzing fear. Despair clouded their expressions. Many began to actively retreat, some crawling, having lost limbs or arms in the day's fighting. The sight of the massive, unholy reserve army broke their will. Bahubali, standing amidst the chaos in his chariot, watched his valiant army dissolve into a panicked stream of humanity. He saw the terror, the loss, the crawling wounded. His jaw tightened, and a look of deep contemplation crossed his face. Death, he murmured, his voice barely audible above the din of the battlefield. Death, death. 1. Lord Krishna, who sat calmly before him as his charioteer, turned his head slightly, his gaze unwavering, waiting for Bahubali to articulate his despair. Then, the contemplation vanished, replaced by a seismic surge of pure, defiant will. Bahubali stood up in the chariot, his voice tearing through the chaotic field like a thunderclap, silencing the immediate panic around him. Mahasena. 1. The colossal shout froze every retreating, crawling, and panicked soldier. Thousands of eyes, human and Rakshasa alike, turned toward the center, toward the chariot where the Magadha king stood. Bahubali looked at his army, his eyes blazing with the fire of unyielding Dharma. What is death? He roared, his voice carrying an impossible distance. To see the enemy's army outnumber our own spirit? That is death. To leave this battlefield in cowardice and abandon the cause of the people? That is death. To let those who have committed adharma, those who are laughing at the suffering of the common man, to let them live, and to not bring justice? That is the true death. 1. He raised Ujjaybau high, its dark wood catching the faint twilight. I am going to win that death. As long as I draw breath, no adharma will happen before my eyes. I will not fail the people we swore to protect. He then looked directly at the sea of despairing faces. Who will come along with me? 1. A lone, inspired soldier near the chariot shouted, I am. 2. Bahubali's voice rose, louder, more challenging. Who is coming to die alongside me? 3. A chorus of shouts, galvanized by his raw courage, rose from the retreating ranks. I am. I am. He delivered the final, rallying cry, his voice imbued with the passion of a warrior king ready for martyrdom. who is the one who will pass death with me and live to tell this heroic tale? 1. The response was an earth-shattering roar from the entire human army. Me. 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 Then Bahubali roars, Parvati Patayi. Har Har Mahadev. 1. Har Har Mahadev. Har Har Mahadev. Har Har Mahadev. The despair was broken. The retreating soldiers, men who had seen their king choose courage over fear, reversed course, their fear transformed into a fierce, righteous rage. Seizing the moment, Bhishma, the commander-in-chief, commanded from the center. Hear me, warriors. The strategy changes. Bahubali, Rudra, Karna, Arjuna. You shall maintain the fight against the allied human kings. Bhishma, Dronacharya, Kripacharya, and the remaining Pandavas and Kauravas will engage the Rakshasa horde. The orders were sharp and precise. The army of the Dharma alliance instantly split into two disciplined forces. Bahubali leaned forward, his resolve absolute. Prabhu, he said to Krishna, take the chariot towards Jayadratha. We will finish him as quickly as possible. Karna, Arjuna. Dispatch your opponents. Break the heads of the human alliance before the night descends completely. Krishna nodded and skillfully turned the chariot. Karna immediately charged toward Bhagadata, and Arjuna advanced on Pundraka Vasudev, understanding the urgent need to eliminate the primary human leadership. As the last sliver of natural light disappeared, plunging the battlefield into an uneven, dangerous darkness, Bahubali performed a final, spectacular act of strategy. He knocked an arrow to Ujjaybau and chanted the complex mantra for the Shuryastra, sun weapon. He drew the string back fully and released the arrow toward the highest point in the sky. The arrow detonated with a blinding flash, and in its place, an artificial sun blazed into existence. It was a radiant, intense source of light, not natural warmth, but providing clear, stark visibility across the entire plain. The Rakshasas and Asuras, creatures of the deep night, recoiled from the sudden, powerful illumination. The soldiers of the Dharma alliance, however, found their footing, their fear lessened by the ability to clearly see the enemy. Under the harsh glare of the artificial sun, the second, deadlier phase of the Mahayuddha began, with the human commanders facing the demonic host, and Bahubali charging toward his terrified, vengeful opponent. Comment. For comment. Vote. Chapter 74, Bahubali's Rage. Under the eerie, intense glare of the artificial sun, Lord Krishna drove the magnificent chariot with an unparalleled serenity, his grace a perfect counterpoint to the terrifying intensity of Bahubali. Jayadratha is positioned near the western flank, Bahu. Krishna's voice was a calm murmur, guiding the chariot through the chaotic field. Bahubali, however, was no longer merely king of Magadha. The sight of his retreating army and the presence of the Rakshasa horde had unlocked a primal, destructive rage. He seemed possessed by the fierce energy of Virbhadra, the destructive manifestation of Shiva. He will pay for his arrogance. Bahubali roared. Jayadratha, leading his Sindhu archers, saw Bahubali charging toward him and attempted to rally his men. He loosed a continuous stream of arrows, invoking the Mayastra, illusion weapon, to create multiple phantom chariots around the true one. But Bahubali's rage consumed the illusions. With a mighty yell of Har Har Mahadev, he unleashed a devastating Indra Astra. The shower of arrows was so dense, so charged with force, that it not only shredded the illusions but tore through the Sindhu formation. Jayadratha's soldiers saw their king's primary defense ripped apart by their enemies' sheer fury. They shrieked and began to retreat, viewing Bahubali not as a man, but as a force of nature. Jayadratha, pale with fear, fought desperately. He threw javelins, maces, and finally challenged Bahubali with his bow, but the fury of the Magadha king was absolute. Bahubali pressed the attack, firing arrows that shattered Jayadratha's protective armor piece by piece. His movements were too fast, too powerful, there was no opening, no reprieve. Jayadratha was beaten, his own courage failing under the onslaught. With a final, bone-jarring shot, Bahubali snapped Jayadratha's bow in two. The king of Sindhu stood disarmed and helpless, his face a mask of terror. Bahubali drew back the Ujjaya bow for the final, fatal shot. Bahu! Krishna's voice snapped, sharp and immediate. Remember the boon. Jayadratha's head must not touch the ground. His father, Vritakshitra, performed a penance, and any man who causes Jayadratha's head to fall to the earth will have his own head explode. Bahubali nodded, his rage momentarily tempered by the strategic warning. He knocked two arrows in rapid succession. The first arrow flew with surgical precision, slicing Jayadratha's head cleanly from his body. The second arrow, guided by Bahubali's ultimate concentration, struck the severed head and carried it high into the air, flying across the entire length of Kurukshetra towards the holy region of Samantapanchaka. At Samantapanchaka, Vritakshitra sat in deep penance. He felt a soft, unexpected weight settle into his lap. He opened his eyes, startled by the interruption, and instantly let out a horrified, silent scream. He saw the detached, lifeless head of his son. In shock, the horrified father involuntarily threw the head onto the ground. The moment Jayadratha's head hit the earth, the fatal condition of the boon was met. Vritakshitra's head exploded into 1,000 pieces, ending his life and the ancient curse. Bahubali turned to Krishna, his breathing heavy. The boon is neutralized, Prabhu. Now, let us finish the rest. The urgency of Bahubali's command drove the other two prongs of the trident. Karna met the relentless Bhagadata with devastating skill. Bhagadata, riding his magnificent war elephant, pressed the attack, but Karna was focused only on victory. The duel was a battle of heavy weapons against divine archery. Karna invoked the powerful Bhargav Astra, Parshurama's weapon, sending a terrifying wave of fiery arrows that surrounded Bhagadata and his elephant. The beast, despite its training, panicked under the intense heat and light. Karna's archery was relentless, finally targeting the massive armor plates of the elephant and the king's standard. With a final, immense arrow, Karna shattered Bhagadata's bow and struck his chest armor, forcing the king of Pragjyotisha to fall from his elephant and be killed in the process. His forces, witnessing the death of their powerful king, immediately stopped fighting and began to withdraw. Arjuna, facing the arrogant Pondraka Vasudev, fought a swift and definitive battle. Pondraka launched the Agneya Astra, but Arjuna countered it effortlessly with the Varun Astra, creating a balanced shield. Arjuna then focused his attack, realizing that Pondraka's bravado hid a lack of true depth. Arjuna quickly disabled Pondraka's chariot and pierced his protective armor. As Arjuna prepared to pivot and address the remaining commanders, Shakuni emerged from the chaos, aiming his own arrow at Arjuna. Foolish nephew! I promised Jayadratha, and I will honor my words. Arjuna, forewarned by the day's strategies, showed no hesitation. With the same cold precision he used on Pondraka, Arjuna countered Shakuni's weak attempt and shot an arrow that found its mark. The Gandhara king, the architect of countless manipulations, fell from his chariot, his life ending swiftly and without ceremony. With Jayadratha killed and Bhagadata, Pondraka Vasudev and Shakuni defeated or dead, the remaining human kings of the allied army were completely demoralized. Bahubali, Karna and Arjuna, who had now joined Rudra, who was already defeating the enemy armies, turned their combined fury onto the last remnants of the human resistance. They systematically engaged and killed the lesser kings of Chedai, Bhaidrava, and Kamrup. Facing the victorious and terrifying triad, the human forces realized their cause was lost. Seeing their leaders slain and their coalition shattered, the remaining human soldiers dropped their weapons, cried out their surrender, and began to retreat en masse from the battlefield. The only foe remaining on Kurukshetra, under the glare of the artificial sun, was the horrifying, unholy army of the Rakshasakrodhakala. Comment. 3. Comment. Vote. Chapter 75, confronting the darkness. With the human command structure of the allied army shattered and their forces retreating, Bahubali turned his chariot to face the true, monstrous threat that had ambushed them, the demonic army of Krodhakala. The intense glare of the artificial sun, still blazing in the sky, casts stark shadows across the battlefield, highlighting the monstrous forms of the Rakshasas and Asuras. "Prabhu," Bahubali stated, his voice now calm but charged with cold determination. "The first task is complete. Now, to the source of the rod. Please drive the chariot towards the heart of the Rakshasa army." Lord Krishna responded instantly. With a gentle flick of the reins, the chariot pivoted, leaving the field of human war and plunging into the terrifying, chaotic realm of the demonic horde. The sight of the king of Magadha and the lord of Dvarka charging directly into their ranks sent a wave of surprise, then savage anticipation, through the Rakshasa host. As Bahubali's chariot cut a swathe through the chaos, he saw the formidable defense being mounted by his allies. The army had successfully bifurcated, and the second human force led by the Kuru elders and the Pandava brothers was holding the line against the initial demonic onslaught. In the thickest knot of combat, Bahubali's eyes found Mahamahim Bhishma. The grandsire, his white armor stained crimson, was fighting with the ferocious, protective fury of a lion defending its young. He was locked in a direct, dizzying duel with Krodhakala himself. The Rakshasa commander, immense and terrifying, wielded a spiked mace that crashed down with the force of a landslide. Bhishma countered every blow with his spear and arrows, his mastery and power over different weapons proving an impassable barrier to the giant Rakshasa. Bahubali knew he couldn't intervene without disrupting the delicate balance of their fight. Bhishma was holding the command in check, allowing the rest of the defense to stabilize. He pressed on. "Our goal remains the same, Prabhu," Bahubali shouted over the din. "We must relieve the pressure. We hit their commanders hard, break their will, and give our soldiers a fighting chance." Karna and Arjuna, having rejoined their respective forces, were right beside him, two blazing pillars of light against the surrounding darkness. Rudra, too, fought with a relentless ferocity, striking down any demonic warrior who dared approach the flanks of his father's chariot. In another sector, the massive form of Gatotkaca, son of Bhima, was a beacon of terror for the Rakshasa army. The half-demon warrior used his own Rakshasa strength and illusions against Krodhakala's minions, crushing Asuras beneath his club and tossing them like pebbles. 1. The goal was unified, the systematic elimination of the Rakshasa command structure. Bahubali, fueled by the cold resolve he had found earlier, became a relentless engine of destruction. He aimed Ujjabha with a terrible precision, targeting the Rakshasa captains and standard-bearers. His arrows, backed by the strength of powerful bow, struck with such power that they often shattered bones and armor, piercing even the demonic skins that deflected normal weapons. He invoked the Indvastra, sending forth a multitude of arrows that exploded across the Rakshasa front line. Demonic warriors were flung back, their bodies reduced to smoke. The enemy soldiers, though fierce, began to show genuine signs of terror. They were accustomed to humans fighting defensively and retreating in fear. But this king and his allies fought with a furious, righteous offensive that demanded their blood. They were being hunted. Cutting deep into the enemy ranks, Bahubali encountered a chilling sight: Labasura, one of Krodhakala's most trusted commanders. Labasura was a grotesque figure of gluttony and malice, his skin a mottled green, his mouth wide and filled with rows of razor teeth. He commanded a huge formation of Asura foot soldiers, his very presence radiating greed and depravity. Labasura roared, recognizing the Magadha king who had been carving a path toward him. "The little human king who killed our Kindajara. I shall feast on your courage." He charged, not with weapons, but with a massive, grotesque shield and a spiked battle axe. Bahubali did not hesitate. "Labasura, you consume the lives of the innocent. Tonight, your labha ends." Labasura cast a powerful mahastra, weapon of delusion, attempting to cloud Bahubali's senses with visions of immense wealth and power, the very greed he personified. But Bahubali's mind, disciplined by Dharma and focused by Krishna's calming presence, remained impervious. Krishna simply chuckled. Bahu's heart is dedicated to his people, he is immune to the lure of Labha. Bahu, strike true. Bahubali unleashed a flurry of the Varun Astra, summoning a continuous blast of cold, focused energy. The Rakshasa horde surrounding Labasura was enveloped by a freezing mist, their movements slowing drastically. The cold energy struck Labasura's battle axe, coating it in a layer of brittle ice. Labasura bellowed in pain and confusion, trying to smash through the cold energy. Bahubali pressed the attack. He targeted the seams of Labasura's heavy armor with 3 successive, powerful arrows from Ujjaba. Crack! The armor fractured. Labasura, enraged, lunged forward with his shield, hoping to crush the chariot. Bahubali released a final, massive arrow charged with the Pashupadastra. The arrow struck Labasura directly in the chest, penetrating the shattered armor. With a shriek that curdled the blood, Labasura was annihilated. His vast form crumbled into dust, and his Asura troops, witnessing the sudden demise of their powerful commander, broke formation and fled in terror. Meanwhile, Karna, Rudra, and Arjuna were equally devastating, their mastery of archery a relentless hammer against the demonic commanders. Karna focused his attack on a towering Rakshasa general named Nirada, a master of dark elemental magic. Nirada summoned waves of fire and shadow, but Karna countered with the Vaivastra and the Shuryastra. Karna's chariot was a blur, his speed too great for the lumbering demon. He killed Nirada with a flawless strike to the heart, causing a massive disruption in the enemy's flanking maneuver. Arjuna, fighting alongside his brothers, took on the ruthless commander Chakshura, a Rakshasa general who led a formidable chariot division. Chakshura attempted to use deception and swift, dark weaponry, but Arjuna's skill was simply too perfect. Arjuna utilized the Indrastra with such precision that his arrows targeted the axles and wheels of the demonic chariots, crippling them one by one. Arjuna finally pinned Chakshura to his own chariot with a powerful Parvatastra, mountain weapon, which bound the demon with immense earth energy before dispatching him, leaving his division leaderless and confused. With the 3 pillars Bahubali, Karna, and Arjuna tearing through the command structure, the pressure on the Dharma alliance's main army began to visibly ease. Bhishma, Drona, and the others, though still fighting desperately against the sheer numbers, found their targeted strikes against the lesser demons becoming more effective as the enemy's coordination failed. The night belonged to the relentless, unified fury of the human heroes. Comment. 0 comment. Vote. Chapter 76, The War of Attrition. The night battle against Krodhakala's demonic legions was a brutal, unrelenting grind. Under the harsh, unsetting glow of the artificial sun, the Maharathis Bhishma, Drona, Kripa, Karna, Arjuna, and the Pandava brothers fought with superhuman endurance, their celestial weapons a continuous, necessary counter to the overwhelming numbers and dark sorcery of the Rakshasas. The soldiers, rallied by Bahubali's courage, found reserves of strength, but their numbers bled freely. They fought valiantly, but the ferocity of the Asuras was relentless. It was only the systematic dismantling of the command structure by Bahubali, Karna, and Arjuna, who acted as 3 unstoppable axes of war, that kept the demonic host from fully engulfing the Dharma alliance. Dawn broke, replacing the artificial light with the pale, weary glow of the true sun. As the morning mist cleared, a horrifying truth was revealed: all of Krodhakala's minions were destroyed or routed. The battlefield was littered with the enormous, decaying bodies of Rakshasas and Asuras, a testament to the night's sacrifice. Only one figure remained, a monolithic symbol of the darkness that refused to yield, Krodhakala himself, locked in a continuous, furious duel with Mahamahim Bhishma. Exhaustion was etched onto the faces of the human warriors. Bahubali, seeing the carnage and the heavy breathing of his brave soldiers, gave the command. Mahasena. The immediate danger has passed. Retreat from the field. Rest and tend to the wounded. Only the Maharathis remain. You have fought with the courage of gods. Go. As the weary soldiers began to withdraw, leaving the vast field to the few supreme warriors, Lord Krishna drove Bahubali's chariot toward the point of ultimate conflict, placing it gently beside the ongoing duel. Bhishma, his shield battered and his limbs moving with the heavy effort of his advanced years, was giving Krodhakala a magnificent, impossible fight. Krodhakala, immense and powerful, was constantly pressing the grandsire, seeking to break his defense. Bahubali watched for a moment, then spoke, his voice low and respectful. Pitamaha, he called out, drawing Bhishma's attention without distracting him from his foe. Krodhakala is here for me. I killed his brother, Kindajur. This is a personal matter of vengeance and dharma. It is my duty to face him, to give him the chance he seeks, and to end this threat to Aryavarta. Please, allow me to take over. Bhishma, deflecting a blow from Krodhakala's mace that sent tremors through the earth, glanced at Bahubali. He saw the grim resolve in the Magadha king's eyes, a true acceptance of responsibility. With a weary but dignified nod, the grandsire gracefully disengaged, retreating to the side to recover and offer counsel. Krodhakala, seeing the change of opponents, let out a terrifying, guttural shriek of triumph and hate. His face, already monstrous, twisted with savage joy. Bahubali. The murderer of my brother. You dared to show your face to me, I will tear the life from you with my own hands. Your vengeance dies here, Krodhakala, Bahubali retorted, drawing Ujjaba. Your brother was an enemy of Dharma. You shall meet the same end, not in hatred, but in justice. The final, decisive duel began. Krodhakala, abandoning all pretense of traditional warfare, rushed Bahubali's chariot with astonishing speed, swinging his massive, spiked mace. Bahubali countered the physical assault with a barrage of focused energy arrows. The battle raged across the desolate field. Krodhakala was a creature of immense stamina and fury, his blows shattering the ground and cracking the air. Bahubali, however, had the advantage of divine counsel and supreme skill. Guided by Krishna, who constantly shifted the chariot to deny Krodhakala's chase, Bahubali fought with calculated aggression, his mind clear, his strikes relentless. Slowly, methodically, Bahubali began to dominate. He disarmed the Rakshasa of his mace with a precision shot from the Vaivastra, which wrapped the weapon in a miniature cyclone and tore it from Krodhakala's grasp. He then crippled the demon's defenses with successive shots from the Agnyastra, burning away his protective aura. The battle continued into the twilight of the second day. Finally, with a powerful volley, Bahubali shattered Krodhakala's armor completely, leaving the demon weakened and exposed. Seeing his opening, Bahubali invoked the mightiest weapons he knew. First, he chanted the mantra for the Brahmastra. The arrow erupted with blinding light, striking Krodhakala directly in the chest. The Rakshasa shrieked as he was consumed by the weapon's terrifying power. He fell, a massive, charred heap on the ground. Then, to Bahubali's horror, the gigantic form of Krodhakala twitched, rose to its feet, and began lumbering toward him again, his massive chest regenerating rapidly. Bahubali's eyes widened. Impossible. He immediately knocked another arrow, chanting the mantra for the Narayana Astra. This weapon of Lord Vishnu's aspect was designed to disarm and subdue. It struck Krodhakala with a massive blast of irresistible energy. The demon was thrown back hundreds of feet, slammed into the ground with catastrophic force. But before the dust settled, Krodhakala once again rose, wobbling slightly, but terrifyingly intact. Desperate, Bahubali invoked the ultimate weapon known to him, the Pashupadastra. He released the missile, a weapon of overwhelming power that struck Krodhakala in a thunderous explosion. Yet, after the smoke cleared, Krodhakala stood once more, his hideous form regenerating at a shocking rate. He laughed, a deep, booming, victorious sound that echoed across the abandoned battlefield. Foolish human! Your weapons are powerless against my destiny. Bahubali dropped his bow momentarily, the exhaustion and confusion hitting him hard. He turned to his charioteer, his voice laced with confusion and urgency. Prabhu, he gasped. What has happened? I have used the most powerful celestial weapons known to the Aryavart. Why can I not kill him? Lord Sri Krishna looked at the devastated king of Magadha. He smiled, a profound, serene expression that held the secrets of existence. Bahu, Krishna said gently, you struck true, and your power is unmatched. But Krodhakala has obtained an extraordinary boon from Lord Brahma himself. Krishna paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. Krodhakala knew of his brother's fate. He knew the threat of the Kali Yuga mortal. So, he asked for two impossible conditions for his death. First, that he can only be killed by a mortal of the Kali Yuga, which you are. But he added a layer of absolute insurance, that his killer must use a weapon that has never before been conceived, forged, or is presently known. Bahubali's eyes went wide as the full, crushing implications of the boon dawned upon him. The Brahmastra, the Narayana Astra, the Pashupatastra, they were all ancient, known weapons. He was the correct executioner, but he wielded the wrong tools. The answer lay not in the arsenal of the past, but in the innovation of the future. A deep contemplative look settled on Bahubali's face. He was the man of the Kali Yuga, standing before a demon protected by an impossible loophole. He had to create something entirely new to kill an ancient evil. 1. Comment. 0 comment. Vote. Chapter 77, The Unconceivable Weapon. The revelation of Krodhakala's boon, the necessity of a weapon that has never before been conceived, forged, or is presently known, hit Bahubali like a physical blow. His mind, exhausted by 2 days of relentless warfare, spiraled into a desperate contemplation. All his knowledge, all the ancient Divyastras learned from his gurus, were suddenly rendered useless. The Rakshasa was immortal to all conventional power. How do I create a weapon that has never existed? He thought, his eyes distant. The Devas dictate the very process of creating an astra. My gurus, Mahadev and Mata Parvati, taught me the rules of invocation and purity. Krodhakala, seeing the sudden cessation of Bahubali's devastating attacks, seized the opportunity. He let out a triumphant roar, his massive, regenerating body surging forward like a demonic tidal wave toward the static chariot. The human mind breaks under the weight of the impossible. Krodhakala bellowed, raising his enormous, spiked fist for a crushing strike. Bahu! Focus! The sharp, urgent command from Lord Sri Krishna snapped Bahubali out of his trance. Krishna, without waiting for instruction, executed a dizzying, tight pivot. The chariot wheels screamed against the dusty earth as they narrowly avoided Krodhakala's blow, which left a deep, smoking crater where they had been moments before. The time for contemplation is over, King of Magadha. Krishna's voice was stern, laced with divine urgency. The truth is not enough, we must survive to use it. Fight. Bahubali took a deep breath, the spiritual shock receding. He renewed his attack, firing rapid volleys of physical arrows, focusing on disorienting Krodhakala rather than inflicting mortal damage. The battle renewed its ferocious dance. Krodhakala was relentless, attacking with sheer brute strength and fury, while Bahubali and Krishna performed an impossible ballet of evasion and counter-strikes. The remaining Maharathis Karna, Arjuna, Bhishma and the others watched the duel with mounting astonishment. They had witnessed the failure of the Brahmastra, the Narayana Astra, and the Pashupatastra. The weapons of the Trimurti had failed to kill this one demon. Their exhaustion was forgotten, replaced by sheer disbelief. Karna, wiping blood and sweat from his brow, stood beside his chariot, his jaw tight. The weapons of the gods, they are ancient and true. Yet, this creature survives them all. How can a mortal hope to defeat such a boon? Arjuna, ever the archer, tracked every move. He is sustained by the Creator's word, not his own strength. Magad Naresh is fighting a conceptual battle now. Look at his focus, he is seeking a new path. Bhishma, resting his worn spear, watched with his aged eyes, the only man who seemed to grasp the full, terrifying weight of Brahma's boon. Only a new thought can defeat an ancient decree, he murmured. As the duel continued a high-speed, desperate game of evasion, Bahubali's mind raced. He reviewed the fundamental principles of Divyastra creation, mantra, sound, dhyana, focus, and diksha, initiation/austerity. Every astra he knew was based on an external energy source: fire, Agni, wind, Vayu, water, Varuna, or the divine power of a deity. The loophole was clear: the weapon must be unconceived. It couldn't be a variation of the known elements. The greatest power I possess is not the knowledge of the gods, but the purity of my own soul. He realized suddenly. The discipline instilled by my true gurus. I must turn my life itself into the weapon. A fierce resolve settled in his heart. Bahubali glanced at Krishna, who returned his gaze with a knowing, profound nod. The Lord of Dvarka understood the decision before it was articulated. The vow given to his gurus must be sacred, but it is less important than the survival of Dharma. Forgive me, Mahadev. Forgive me, Mata Parvati, Bahubali murmured, a silent vow passing his lips. The time for rules has ended. This battle requires a sacrifice greater than my life. The moment of creation arrived. Bahubali knew he needed a brief window of stability. He knocked an arrow, the one weapon he could invoke that relied solely on elemental, serpentine bondage. Nagastra, he roared. The arrow flew, and instantly, a coil of immense, spectral serpents erupted, wrapping themselves around Krodhakala's massive form. The demon struggled and thrashed, but the ancient, binding power of the Nagastra held him captive, locking him in place for a few crucial seconds. Then, Bahubali performed his final, shattering act. He took a simple, mundane arrow from his quiver, a piece of wood and steel with no spiritual history. He held it upright. He closed his eyes, and his yogic shakti, the immense power accumulated through years of meditation, discipline, and devotion, surged out of his body. A tangible, golden white aura enveloped him, making the air around the chariot crackle. He began to chant a mantra, not a Vedic chant for a god, but a personal oath of commitment. I, Bahubali, son of Abhiram and Sumitra, disciple of Mahadev and Mata Parvati, king of Magadha. I have followed the path of Dharma and Satya without wavering. All the penance, all the sacrifice, all the righteous deeds done in my life, all my accrued karmaful I now sever from my soul. The energy channeling into the arrow was terrifying. It wasn't fire or light, it was the concentrated essence of a righteous life. As he chanted, his allies heard the revelation of his true gurus, the supreme deities. A wave of collective shock washed over the Maharathis. Duryodhana gasped, a disciple of Mahadev and Mata Parvati themselves? And he never spoke of it? Arjuna muttered, his power is not merely human, it is transcendent. Bhishma smiled faintly, a tear tracing a path through the dust on his cheek. The true secret is out. How could he not know? He already asked his mother about Bahubali, and she told him about everything she knew of him. Bahubali opened his eyes, now burning with the light of pure, personal sacrifice. His voice was a final, clear decree. I am putting all my karmaful into this arrow as its power. Let this power, which has no name, no history, and no divine source, let this arrow pierce the darkness that is trying to cover all of Aryavarta. With a terrible, soul-wrenching effort, he released the arrow. The final arrow, glowing not with the fire of the Agniastra but with the blinding, terrible light of compressed karmaful, struck Krodhakala directly in the center of his chest. There was no explosion. Instead, a light so profound and absolute that it transcended the spectrum burst forth from Krodhakala's body. The light of pure righteousness and sacrifice met the darkness of the demonic boon. 1. Every warrior on the field, Karna, Arjuna, Bhishma, and even Krishna, instinctively raised a hand to cover their eyes. The light was not physical, it was spiritual, a confrontation between Dharma and Adharma at the atomic level. When the light finally subsided, leaving behind a lingering scent of ash, an eerie, profound silence fell over Kurukshetra. Where Krodhakala had been bound, nothing remained. The immense, powerful body of the Rakshasa king had been utterly annihilated, reduced to a small, insignificant pile of fine ash scattered across the ravaged field. The war was over. The combined armies of men and demons were defeated, and the greatest threat to Aryabharta lay disintegrated on the battlefield. Bahubali lowered his bow, his entire body trembling with exhaustion and the shock of his ultimate, internal sacrifice. His karmafal was gone, spent on one single, necessary arrow. He had won the war, but he had paid the highest, most personal price imaginable. 3. Comment. 1 comment. Vote. Chapter 78, The Quiet Aftermath and the Coronation. 2 days after the thunderous end of the Mahayuddha, the vast plains of Kurukshetra held a mournful silence. The surviving soldiers of the Dharma alliance, exhausted but alive, tended to their wounds and, with solemn respect, conducted the cremation rituals for the fallen on both sides. The air was thick with smoke and quiet grief. In his tent, Bahubali slept a sleep so deep it resembled a coma, the inevitable collapse after the superhuman exertion of facing Krodhakala. For 2 days, the man who had saved the continent was completely unconscious. When he finally awoke, it was to a world purged of immediate terror. After eating his fill to recover his strength, Bahubali proceeded to the main command tent, where the surviving kings and Maharathis were holding a meeting. As he entered, every head turned. A spontaneous, thunderous wave of applause erupted, a roar of genuine respect and gratitude that eclipsed the sound of any battle drum. He had faced the impossible and won. Bahubali simply nodded, acknowledging their tribute, before the heavy silence of deliberation settled once more. Lord Krishna broke the silence, his eyes fixed on Bahubali. His tone was one of absolute certainty, reflecting the consensus of the divine and the mortal. Maharaja Bahubali, Krishna began, you have not simply won a war, you have single-handedly established a new dharma for this age. You faced an impossible threat and, through your sacrifice, preserved the balance of Aryabharta. The time of fragmented kingdoms and self-serving monarchs must end. I propose that Bahubali be crowned the emperor of Aryabharta. The proposal, though grand, met with immediate, unanimous support. Duryodhana, the crown prince of Hastinapur, stood first, his voice firm. Bahubali is my friend, but more importantly, he is the shield of this world. The Kauravas are ready to join his banner. We accept him as our sovereign emperor. Dharmaraj Yudhishthir, the eldest Pandava, spoke next, his voice echoing Duryodhana's sincerity. We stand in awe of his courage. The Pandavas, too, pledge our loyalty and our strength to the Emperor Bahubali. One by one, every king and leader of the Dharma alliance agreed. Furthermore, all the major enemy kingdoms that had fought Sindhu, Pragyadisha, Pandra were already without leadership, their kings having been slain in battle. Their armies were defeated, and their lands now fell under the protectorate of Magadha. Thus, by acclamation and divine will, the decision was sealed. Within weeks, a grand ceremony was held, though simple by imperial standards, reflecting the character of its new ruler. Bahubali was crowned the emperor of Aryabharta, ruling from his capital in Magadha. Immediately, invitations were dispatched to all other kings and kingdoms that had remained neutral during the war. Having learned the terrifying tale of Krodhakala and Bahubali's heroics, the simple man who sacrificed his own karmafal to save the world, the independent kingdoms quickly and willingly agreed to join his empire. The entire continent of Aryabharta had now declared the king of Magadha their sovereign emperor. Bahubali wasted no time. He immediately began the massive undertaking of implementing reforms across the entire empire, mirroring the successful policies he had pioneered in Magadha. He solidified the Nyaya Rakshaks as the continent-wide apparatus for justice, eliminating corruption, ensuring fair trade, and establishing governance that focused on the welfare of the common people rather than the whims of the nobility. This era of reform, marked by stability and righteousness, healed the wounds of the Great War and ushered in a time of unprecedented peace and prosperity. The years passed smoothly under the just and firm hand of the emperor. Once Bahubali had completed his monumental task, when the reforms were fully implemented, the infrastructure was stable, and the entire continent was unified under a system of true dharma, he felt his karmic duty had been fulfilled. He called his family and the great Maharathis to his court. Without fanfare or hesitation, the great emperor abdicated the throne. He crowned his son, Rudra, as the new emperor of Aryabharta. His purpose achieved, Bahubali withdrew from the burdens of governance, choosing to enjoy the quiet, simple life he had long sought. He lived out his days peacefully with his beloved wife, Dushala, his daughter-in-law, Avantika, and his grandson, Amrendra Bahubali, enjoying the fruits of his monumental service to the world.